So, Disney's Snow White remake recently had its premiere, but you'd be forgiven for not knowing about it and not seeing any press from it. Because Disney scaled back the premiere and reduced it to essentially only having photographers and an in-house crew. So notably, there was no press on the red carpet to interview the stars, which when this news came out, everyone knew exactly why, and it's because Disney is just a big pussy. To put it, crudely. So let's rewind the clock here. So Snow White, of course, this is a remake of the 1937 classic Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, from, like I said, 1937, Walt Disney's first feature-length film, the first feature-length animated film. Or that's actually not true. There were some other ones from other countries, but this was the first well-known one in Technicolor. The kind of the way Pong isn't the first video game, but it may as well be, right? It's the one that really kicked things off. And notably about Snow White, Disney, as I've talked about on this channel many times, nor am I the first person to even discuss this to begin with, Disney has no problem grave digging, right? And doing this necromancy and taking these old franchises and properties, and especially with these live action remakes, taking these older cartoons, right, and giving them new life. But what new life really means is basically doing the same thing shot for shot, or doing something so different that it becomes why that just feels off, right? Notably, Snow White is different. So really, there hasn't been, unlike something like Little Mermaid or Beauty and the Beast or Cinderella or The Lion King or Peter Pan, all these properties have had spin-offs or sequels, whether theatrical or even just direct-to-video. Snow White has had no such sequels or spin-offs or remakes until now, right? It was kind of seen as, untouchable, because it's the origin of Disney's, their feature film division. And again, it's part of this larger trend of Disney remaking these animated films into live action, which is it's ironic and it's a shame, because that film was Walt Disney's, was Walt Disney's attempt to prove that animation was a legitimate art form, just as valid as live action. So to see it be so cynically and shamelessly remade into live action feels wrong, right? But that's not really the controversy around this film. There are many controversies around this film, and I'm going to kind of go through them. And some of them are bigger than others and warrant more of a discussion. But the big one, and this one shouldn't be a controversy, just has to do with Rachel Zegler, the actress playing Snow White. Right off the bat, non-white casting immediately pissed people off. Not to the same degree as Halle Bailey, as Ariel, but that's just because Halle Bailey is a dark-skinned black woman, and Rachel Zegler is of Colombian descent, not white, but fair, but lighter skin. I think literally today she was, I guess, because she's obviously doing press and interviews leading up to Snow White, which comes out this weekend. She talked about, because she really came onto the scene. She made her debut in Steven Spielberg's West Side Story remake from a couple years back. Interesting enough, she basically got an audition because she posted a video of herself singing "Shallow" by Lady Gaga from A Star Is Born, and she's just so phenomenal, right? She talked about literally today that during that audition process, she had to some executives. I forget who distributed that movie, but some executives didn't believe she was actually Latinx. So she had to prove it, I guess. And she was just she had a quote being what, did they want me to bring my abuelita in, right? That's me doing my white guy, Colombian accent, Colombian, right? So but there was still outrage. How dare they cast a non-white woman to be Snow White? I guess, a lot of times with racists, and I'm sorry if you're watching this going, I am also very upset, and this channel isn't for you. I don't know what to tell you. sometimes like they'll have a point, or at least there'll be like internal logic where they'll be like, well, the whole point of the character is that it says like the movie says is like her name's Snow White because her skin is white as snow. But who gives a shit, right? Is that what, do people really know that? Are they thinking that when they're watching the movie? No, they don't give a shit about that. They only give a shit when they're cast, when the character is recast to be a different ethnicity, right? So they already turned a certain segment of the population off. Then Rachel Zegler got into some hot water for talking about how this remake was going to be different than the 1937 original, specifically how it was going to be more feminist, right? Saying, quote, it's no longer 1937. She's not going to be saved by the prince, and she's not going to be dreaming about true love. She's dreaming about becoming the leader she knows she can be, end quote. The leader she can be? Of all of the Disney princesses, and frankly of all the Disney movies, and this is saying something, of all the Disney movies, Snow White might have the most superficial surface level characterizations of any movie in their canon. Save the dwarves, right? Not barring the dwarves or the witch, but Snow White in particular, and then the prince, like they're nothing characters, right? So what are you talking about? And this isn't me criticizing Rachel, but more so Disney. Like, what are they talking about of her becoming the leader she knows she can be? Because here's the thing, I've talked about this many times on the channel, that when people are like, oh, they're making these Disney movies political, they're really not. There's nothing in them in terms of the themes or the content or the dialogue that's particularly political. The only thing that's political, quote unquote, or progressive are like the casting choices. So like when these movies, like they're never politically progressive, right? So that her talking about like, oh, she's dreaming about becoming the leader she knows she can be, like this kind of girl boss thing. Either this is her doing a PR spin that she's been instructed to do as part of her salary and contract, or she's being earnest, and these actors like her, like Halle Bailey, like they get sucked into it because they're almost pitched a more progressive reimagining that never materializes. That it ends up either becoming a beat for beat remake or something that's just so lukewarm and tepid that it's like, you know, it could hardly even be considered political, like I said. But again, you have some people who are Snow White purists, which again, I don't know why. Well, I know why. It's because they're racist, right? But, you know, if I'm going to give them benefit of the doubt, I really just don't understand. Like, of all the Disney movies to be really upset about, Snow White is such a nothing character. You could appreciate the film for its artistry, but I'm actually very outspoken. Like, I'm not a huge fan of Snow White, the 1937 version. But again, Rachel Zegler has to be very diplomatic. So, you know, when people were upset about her comments, she had a quote. She said something saying, quote, I interpret people's sentiments towards this film as passion. What an honor to be part of something that people feel so passionately about. We're not always going to agree with everyone who surrounds us, and all we can do is our best, end quote. And I know what she wanted to say was like, everybody just fuck off. Like, you're all being so stupid about this. But she has to be like, you know, I appreciate how passionate they are about it, right? I see a quote here, or not a quote here, a comment here. Seriously, anti-woke grifters, grow the hell up. Those people need to know what is happening. I think I see what you're saying. You're talking about the people who basically have made a livelihood on YouTube, specifically, being angry, manufacturing outrage. And, you know, it was Disney stuff with Daisy Ridley and John Boyega and Kelly Marie Tran, and then also Halle Bailey, especially Brie Larson. Rachel Zegler has kind of become like a new one in that group, where, you know, you'll see like thumbnails like, is she really serious? And it'll be like some unflattering picture of Rachel's, right? So she's kind of ended up in that group, which is a shame because she's really talented and really great, and nothing she's saying is wrong. But anyway, and then people also got mad at her because after Trump was reelected, she had a pretty angry, or I would say indignant and justified, response to the election and people who voted for him. But she later apologized, probably because Disney was like, you need to go out and apologize. And she apologized for, quote, contributing to the negative discourse, end quote. Translation, Disney was like, if you ever want to work in this town again, you need to go fix this right now. So that's all the Rachel Zegler stuff. Then there's the whole stuff about the dwarfs, and I think this is actually valid. Peter, when this movie was announced, or at least, we got more clarity about it. Like, we had casting, and I think we had some production. It, like, went into production or whatever it was. Peter Dinklage, of course, very famous actor from Game of Thrones, who, of course, has... I don't know if is it PC to say he is a dwarf? No, it'd be like a little person, right? In any case, he's part of that community. If you know in the let me know, because I don't want to say the wrong thing, right? But he really took offense to the fact they were even making this movie, saying, quote, I was a little taken aback when they were very proud to cast a Latina actress as Snow White. You're still telling the story of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Take a step back and look at what you're doing there. It makes no sense to me. You're progressive in one way, and you're still making that fucking backwards story about seven dwarves living in a cave together. What the fuck are you doing, man? End quote. It was, here we go. Thank you, Mario. It was in D23 2022. Yeah, so it was like a couple years ago when they because I think they had announced it before Rachel Zegler was even like she was like a teenager, right? Like she wasn't famous yet. I think it was like 2016 or 17. But yeah, it was around there in 2022 when they really were like, we are making this. Here are some details about it. And I guess there was debate. There was not the dwarf community, the dwarfism community, were not monolithic about this. That there were other little people. Actors. I don't want to say little actors. I'm sorry, please. I'm not trying to be problematic. Please let me know. Sorry. There were some actors also in this community who were like, I don't mind this. I just want them to include us. And there's barely any roles for little people as it is in movies and TV shows. So there's plenty of little people who would kill to fill these roles if you don't want to, Peter Dinklage, right? Because you've achieved a certain level of success that you're not typecast as just like a little person. But not everyone has that luxury. So, again, I'm not part of this community. I can't really speak to this, but that's an interesting tension, right? Of course, Disney put out a very corporate-y response saying, quote, to avoid reinforcing stereotypes from the original animated film, we're taking a different approach with these seven characters and have been consulting with members of the dwarfism community, end quote. But yeah, it is it's something that us big people, we don't really think about. But it's kind of fucked up that this is one of the most seminal movies or most important movies in film history. Basically putting little people who exist in real life as these magical creatures, right? That aren't human in a sense, right? So the movie also had that. And then there was also the whole Gal Gadot of it all, who of course, the Israeli actress who was in the Fast and Furious movies, is of course, or was, I should really use past tense, was of course Wonder Woman. But again, very outspoken support of Israel during its war in Gaza. So, this whole movie just had so much swirling controversy around it. And sometimes it was very specific incidents, and then other times it was just general things that could not be solved, right? Unless you decided to recast Rachel Zegler or Gal Gadot, right? So all of this to say is something that I've been talking about, unfortunately, very frequently over the past couple of weeks and months, is another example of Disney, if not abandoning diversity, then throwing diversity under the bus, right? Again, deciding to scale back this premiere, not make as big of a to-do about all of this. And again, Disney's been doing this for the past couple of years since Bob Iger returned. Famously was Disney, our films have become too political. It's I have not seen a single political Disney film in the past 20 years. So by political, you just mean having a diverse cast. So we've been seeing this for years, but especially now with Trump's reelection, you see a very calculated effort by these companies to, at the very least, not piss off Trump, but in a more cynical, unsettling sense, trying to play into people's prejudices or ignorance. And again, it feels, and again, it's really a shame, especially for the people who were involved with this film, right? So Martin Kleba, who is a little person. He's the voice of Grumpy. He was an advisor on the film. He's been in stuff. He's been in. He was in Pirates of the Caribbean. at least the first one, he was like one of the pirates. He was on the crew of the good guys. He said about the scaling back of this, he was very forthright, saying, quote, "It really isn't going to be a red carpet. It's basically going to be a pre-party, watch the movie, and that's it. There's not going to be this whole hoopla of Disney's first fucking movie they ever made because of all this controversy. They're afraid of the blowback from different people in society," end quote. And again, it's really unfortunate, right? Because what's going to happen is this movie's not going to do well. As we talked about on the channel, the projections for this are not super big. And I would imagine that if it even makes the projections, it's going to be on the lower side. Because it's just it's not going to do well because it's not going to make a bunch of money. But it was made, I looked it up, it was made for $250 million. That's insane. That is just insane. So huge budget that needs to be recouped. It's an unnecessary remake that nobody asked for. And, I have yet to see the reviews for this, really. I've seen some early reactions, but those are always skewed. It just seems uninspired, right? It's just not a movie that's going to catch fire. But what's going to happen, it's not going to do well, and commentators explicitly and Disney implicitly are going to blame the film's poor performance on diversity and the politics and all these quote-unquote controversies. So, no tears will be shed for this movie not performing well, but tears will be shed for the fact that Disney clearly put their stars like Rachel Zegler in uncomfortable positions and didn't really stand up for them, right? Viviana writes in the live chat here, even in Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings, they did not use actors with dwarfism. Gimli actor was like 6 feet tall. 6+. Exactly, right? So that's going back to the comment from Martin Kleppa, who was the person who talked about, there's not really many roles for these people. Vivian also then followed up in the chat saying the new Willy Wonka, right? And by new, at this point we're looking at 20 years ago. But by new, we're talking about the ones that she and I grew up with, the Johnny Depp one. But even in the newer one, with Timothée Chalamet, isn't Hugh Grant like the Oompa Loompa, like the main one? He's not a little person, right? So there's just so little opportunities for this community. So I understand that it's a very complex issue, but what is not complex is the shellacking this movie is going to get come this weekend when it opens. Wow, what an interesting story. I'm sure you have some thoughts about the topic, so comment below, let me know what you think. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. It really, really helps people find the channel and makes me feel all warm inside. Until next time, I'm Peter Mancuso. Peace out.